Welcome to the First Party Pod. We are your hosts, Gloria
and Rio.
We have a very special guest today. He is the CEO and co-founder of Permutive. Welcome, Joe Root, to the First Party Pod.
Welcome, Joe.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited to dig in, but I think to start, our listeners would love to know for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you actually came to co-found Permutive and why you think it was the right market fit at the time.
Great question. So we are not a story of like fantastic long-term vision, but rather probably one of persistence. So when we started the company originally, we were trying to build a platform for edge computing. So what we'd kind of started to observe was, hey, there are more and more devices in the world. It's growing exponentially. The data being produced about us is growing exponentially as well. And the cloud was starting to become a bottleneck and a challenge for handling all this data being generated in the world. Effectively, what companies are having to do is either process less data or do it more slowly or just take on huge costs. So we've become really interested in this area known as edge computing, which is, hey, rather than processing the data in the cloud, why don't you move the data processing out to the devices? And when you do that, you kind of almost have like a supercomputer, which leverages all the devices in the world. So you can process almost unlimited data, you can do it really fast, and you can do it like pretty cheaply. But there's this other huge benefit to it that it's very privacy safe because the data is kept on devices. So we gone out to market. We joined this program called Y Combinator, which is where like OpenAI and Airbnb and Stripe and all these companies started. And we turned up there and no one wanted this product. Like no one was buying a platform for edge computing. But one of our partners, this guy called Paul Bukai, had been an early Google employee and had come up with AdWords as a concept. And he was like, I think digital advertising is broken. This platform should be applied to digital advertising. And we had a few customers who were digital advertising companies at that point in time. It's like 2015, 2016. And as we started to like talk to them and understand why they were using us, we basically caught the very early signs of Apple getting rid of cookies because we were European, we knew about GDPR, and we started to realize, hey, all these changes are going to fundamentally break digital advertising, and now could be a really good time to build a platform in that space. So we've kind of been fortunate enough to ride a lot of these kind of tailwinds around privacy and platform changes and cookie deprecation, but we didn't come to market with the vision we have today.
Sounds like a hard pivot, but I don't think that's an unusual thing in tech, right?
No, I think it was a fairly common story, especially in that embryonic stage when there are two of you working on it.
Yeah, that's you definitely made the right bet, I would say. But I think just to dumb it down a little bit for our listeners, I think a DMP is, what you're categorized as. And a lot of people, I don't think, understand what a DMP really is. So just for our listeners, would you mind describing what that really is, how Permutive fits into that world, and also how do you help them grow their business?
So kind of data management platforms historically have been a way for brands and publishers to kind of effectively build audiences and then go and activate those audiences within the advertising ecosystem. They actually ended up solving very different use cases for publishers and for advertisers. So for publishers, DMPs were used as a way to collect all their first-party data, to build audiences, and then to go and target those audiences. And the challenge which we found when we came into the ecosystem was as cookies were disappearing and as cookies were going away and third-party signals were going away, publishers were starting to see less and less programmatic spend because there was no audience targeting available. So publishers were increasingly turning to their DMP to say, hey, we have our own data, we can build audiences, and if we provide those audiences, maybe this will fix the loss of revenue which is coming from a loss of third-party audiences and third-party signals. So Permutive came to market effectively because as DMPs from that first generation tried to make this transition, they had two major challenges. First is they were built on top of third-party cookies, and as third-party cookies were going away, effectively they were working on fewer and fewer of a publisher's audiences. So the total number of like ads they could target against those audiences was declining. And problem number two is these platforms were built in the cloud and they were very slow and couldn't keep up with the fast nature of consumers as they moved across the internet. all that came together to mean that with kind of these historical DMPs like Crux and Oracle and Lotami and Adobe, they could only target 20% of their audience with data. Whereas Permutive came along with this platform built for first-party data, a platform which was built to process data really quickly, and we could target 100% of ads with data. And really kind of that second generation of DMP, which I suppose Permutive really helped pioneer within the space, effectively enabled publishers to build their own signals to replace the third-party signals which were historically been in advertising. And kind of that started off with direct sold advertising, then it moved into PMPs, and now we've got the emergence of curation. Those signals have only grown in terms of where they're being used and adopted today.
Love the fact you brought up curation. That's something we definitely want to dig into here. And also really like the point about kind of that first generation of DMPs. In fact, there was a joke we would tell about how a lot of it was really the last DMP standing from that first gen, right, of the DMPs for the, for buy side. And so it's, one reason we wanted to have you on here is to talk about, I think, the story for publishers, the story for supply, and even looking at privacy laws, right? I mean, there's like GDPR, CCPA, CPRA, PIPA, there's just the alphabet soup of them, right? And in the background, that's been driving cookie deprecation, right? But I think for publishers, it's a bleak picture, right? When you look at monetization has been going down, right? Certainly for ID-less, traffic, it monetizes much lower. It's a challenge when you look, especially all the, I think, the tribulations they've had. Like moving forward, what do you think the impact's going to be in publishers as signal loss intensifies, right?
Of course. So I think it's spot on, right? So what we've seen is deprecation of IDs and third-party signals to the extent where today only 30% of consumers still have a third-party cookie or ID available on them. What that means, like from the buy side story, right, is you're bidding on fewer and fewer consumers. So CPMs are going up, cost per acquisition is going up, and performance is going down. And then problem number two, because you're only reaching 30% of consumers, incremental sales is down massively. So what we're actually seeing as a result of that is brands are starting to pull money out of kind of the traditional open internet environments and put them back into the walled gardens. So the way a publisher experiences that is this massive decline in overall revenue and CPMs and everything within there. And to your point, like most strongly felt within that ID-less environment. Now, that is kind of the current state of play, and it's a harder and harder environment for publishers to operate in programmatically. What we've seen and what we've really worked with our customers on over the last kind of, let's call it 5 to 8 years of Permutive has been, hey, as that signal loss happens, you have signals which are 100% addressable. You have your own cohort signals and audience signals, which are available on every single consumer, and you have contextual signals, which are available across every single consumer. And if you use those signals for audience targeting and for running your ad campaigns, actually you can reach consumers which ad tech can't, and you can deliver improved performance, improved reach, improved incremental sales. But in order to do that, you need to stand up a direct sold motion, which is either selling directly on IOs or with PMPs, and you need to go to market with that. And over the last kind of however many years of Permutive, we've seen billions of dollars now transacted against those signals. And for most of our publishers, they've moved the bulk of their revenue onto that model. And that's a great solid foundation in an area which continues to grow in double-digit growth for them year on year. I think the risk, though, is if we don't make it easy to buy those signals, at some point, agencies and advertisers say, hey, it's too hard to scale in this environment, and we're just going to go to Facebook and Google in environments where it's easier to scale. So I think kind of publishers have benefited in many ways, the ones who prepared for it, but we do need to now figure out how do we make it easy for advertisers and agencies to operate in this new world.
Yeah, it's interesting that point about CPMs for publishers. I mean, I've had some publisher clients where CPMs have dropped to such an extent that they're for open exchange, they're even losing money. So it's been really tough for them.
So when I read about Permutive, you guys talk a lot about empowering publishers through curation. And can you walk us through what does that actually look like in a day-to-day practice? For example, maybe what a curated deal actually looks like from the moment a publisher defines an audience to the moment an advertiser can actually activate that audience.
So I think curation is such a big topic to unpack, right? So there's like the technology and then there are the business models. We think the technology is amazing. A lot of the business models have question marks over them. But I think kind of the opportunity for publishers within curation is they sit on this wealth of signals, and those signals make the entirety of their advertising addressable. But they're also highly performance signals because publishers know so much about their audiences. The challenge has been those have never been accessible programmatically. So it's been nigh on impossible to buy publisher signals via the DSPs. And if you want to do it, it has to be done via deal IDs, but those can become very cumbersome when an agency is managing hundreds or thousands of these. So the really powerful thing within curation is that publishers can push their signals into the curation platforms, and those signals can then be used to buy their inventory and package up larger deals. So that means, for example, like Dentsu have used Permutive to build curated audiences for one of their brands, and they come into the platform. They can see publisher audiences, which publishers have permission. They can choose the audiences they want to target and the publishers they want to work across. And then that gets condensed down into deal ID, which the Dentsu team then hand out to their traders, and their traders go and buy against that. And the really powerful thing within these curation platforms is publishers can choose, hey, I want to permission this audience to this advertiser or this agency downstream. So they have the governance and control over their signals.
It's interesting with curation. I remember, like, I guess middle of last year, there's this big buzzer at it, right? Everyone was talking about curation was going to solve everything. And then, talking to publisher clients, they just say, oh, it's the same old thing. Just everyone, just different players are taking a cut this time. Everyone's scraping out a little bit. It really hasn't moved the needle. Like, why do you think, let's say, Curation 1.0 didn't make a big difference? And why will Curation 2.0 be different? And what is Permutive's role in that?
The dirty secret of kind of Curation 1.0 is that it was just built on top of third-party IDs and third-party cookies. And Re has been an arbitrage game, which a lot of kind of modern ad networks have gone out and exploited. Today, what a lot of folk are doing is, like a lot of curators will end up being ID companies, right? And what they'll do is they'll use their ID to attach data, and then they'll package up their third-party data across publisher inventory and go and sell that to an agency. And there's this agency challenge, which is agencies today assume, hey, if it's a deal ID, then there's supply path optimization. It's going to have, it's going to be more transparent. It's not going to have any MFA in it. And that's not true, because right now, a lot of these businesses are taking 70, 80% take rates, taking a lot of money out of the middle. And actually, it's a less clean supply path, and it's not taking you to publisher data. Instead, you're just buying on the old historical third-party data anyway. So that business model, I think, has meant that curation has exploded, but publishers have seen none of the revenue from it. Instead, you've had a lot of middlemen who've got very rich off the back of doing that. But it's an unsustainable practice, because as agencies start to dig in, and more specifically brands do, they're like, if we thought that ANA report from a couple of years was really bad, like what's happening in curation right now is so much worse. So the promise of Curation 2.0 is actually, in the first version, publishers didn't participate with their data. In the second version now, publishers are starting to realize they need to make their data available, and they need to take a more active role. And also what we're starting to see is that actually agencies are starting to act as curators rather than outsourcing it to others. And when agencies do that, then all of a sudden the game changes pretty dramatically. Like Stagwell, a great example of this. They're investing heavily in news. They've taken control of curation, and they're performing off the back of that. And if those two things can be true, that agencies take control and lean into it and actually audit what's happening and build these deals themselves, and publishers are making their data available and working with agencies to make sure they're using that, well, hey, we can build a really clean ecosystem. And then I suppose the second piece, which Permutive is really excited about, is technology companies like ours can all of a sudden innovate on top of these curation platforms, because signals which weren't biddable before all of a sudden can be made biddable. So that's allowed us, for example, to reimagine what a clean room looks like in a world of curation and publisher signals.
That you mentioned that, because I mean, my definition of curation would be trusted data, trusted high quality inventory, and a trusted SSP. So I'm wondering, like, do you agree with the statement or this definition? And then, like, what would Permutive's role be? And like, how are you be, like, what would the process be of activating those signals from publisher through Permutive to into supply to the SSP? Can you maybe walk us through that a little bit?
I think it's a beautiful definition of what curation could be. I don't think it's necessarily what curation is today. So I think kind of what it can be, and I suppose the role which Permutive wants to support and facilitate is today when you say trusted data, primarily this is still old school third party data sets which are diminishing and have found a new home for themselves. Really, what should be powering curation of publisher data sets. Permutive's role is kind of twofold. The first is we build those audiences and those data sets on behalf of publishers. And part two, we enable publishers to permission those into the curation platforms so curators can work with and adopt those signals. So for example, if you drop into Permatic today, inside their curation platform, there's a tab called seller-defined audiences, and publishers are able to stock the shelves of those with their own data. Now, that is what agencies should be leaning into, building their own packages against and by it. Today, they outsource a lot of that, and that's where a lot of the challenges, but also risk for the agency lies. Because ultimately, when those get unpacked, what you realize is it's not trusted data. It's delivering on some safe publishers, but it's being used to package up like a lot of other dodgy inventory, and it's not really a cleaner supply path through to the publisher.
What's prevented publishers from activating their data into supply, right? So it's like, is it privacy concerns? Is it just the fact they haven't had a tool like let's say a supply side DMP like a Permutive? Like what has really held that up?
I think the major challenge has been, like I said at the start, first party data has been an enormous booming industry for publishers. So we're seeing billions of dollars which has been flighted against kind of publisher audiences and publisher data and signals. And it's actually how most publishers now position and tell their story in market when they're out selling to agencies and out selling to brands. They say, hey, we have our own first party data platform. It has all these audiences. We have all these targeting and taxonomy capabilities within there. Come and work directly with us. And I think kind of the first fear with curation has been, hey, if I make my audiences available there, why would they come to me and why would they come to my direct sold offering or to my PMP offering if it's all available within curation? And on the other side, these curation platforms gave publishers very little control over their data and governance. That's changed dramatically over the last 12 months. And what we spend our time with publishers on is just as you have an audience strategy for direct sold, you now need to have an audience strategy for curation. And that's going to be a different taxonomy, and you're going to build that taxonomy to not contain your most valuable audiences, but you're going to provide audiences which scale and allow brands to get going with buying you in the open. And that's like, I think it just takes time to build that strategy. It's taken time for the platforms to give kind of the governance and the permissioning controls to publishers so they can feel safe doing that.
So, what do you think about the actual adoption of curation so far? It was such a hot topic last year. And so I'm wondering from the Permutive perspective, have you guys been seeing also a skyrocket in adoption of curation deals?
Yeah, I think we've seen curation really take off for Permutive in two lenses. One is actually with agencies and making these kind of curated audiences available for agencies to then go and buy against. And I think Permutive sits across kind of 70% of the largest media companies in the world as their audience platform. So we're able to offer all these signals, and we've really benefited from that trend. The second piece, and I think this is this is actually where we've seen far greater growth overall, has been in pairing curation with Permutive's clean room platform. Effectively, what we're enabling brands and advertisers to do is bring their data into kind of a safe environment to then build models across the publisher ecosystem on top of publisher signals, and then to collapse that down into a single curated deal ID, which they can go and buy against. So actually kind of our belief is the future of clean rooms is probabilistic rather than deterministic. And we actually build those models and then build kind of these probabilistic kind of curated packages, which an advertiser can then go and buy against. And that scaled very quickly. Like last year, we saw about a 10x growth against kind of media being executed against those kind of modeled AI-based audiences and curated packages.
That's an interesting use case for clean rooms. I mean, I think that would definitely speed up adoption. I mean, you look at most of it now, it's certainly not being driven by privacy. I think it's more being driven by measurement, right? And measurement using deterministic models, right? So, or deterministic matching. That's interesting.
Yeah, I guess on the topic of AI, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on curation usually implies selectivity. So, with AI in the mix, do you think that it actually could become dynamic? So, can curated deals evolve in real time based on user behavior in the future?
Yeah, so I think we at Permutive, we used to have, if someone posted in a Slack channel that said AI, it would have this really insulting message, which the engineers had like programmed into Slack for us, basically like calling you an idiot for referencing AI. So I've like almost been like,
We that
trained
consultant.
at this. So I've been trained like a dog to like almost have this allergic reaction to AI. But over the last kind of 12 to 18 months, it's really transformed our business. And the reason why is the opportunity, but the challenge with kind of publisher signals and what sits within Permutive is there are hundreds of thousands of these signals and they're bespoke publisher by publisher. So each publisher will have a taxonomy of 2 or 3,000 audiences and they're their own custom and bespoke audiences. And then they're going to have like 10,000 contextual signals. And it's so hard to sift through this at scale if you want to kind of create a curated package. And what's now possible is that you can start to layer AI over the top of this to understand those taxonomies and to then start to curate and build packages off the back of that. And where I was very skeptical maybe 12 to 18 months ago, my perspective is radically changed over that period of time because all of a sudden, like, you can just paste in an audience request and now it's going to generate you a whole kind of curated set of audiences. The second piece, and our publishers do this day in, day out with Permutive, is right now they optimize their audience targeting, their campaigns using AI because we have, like, for example, we can analyze every single kind of campaign they've run historically and start to figure out, hey, if this is a campaign for Coke, well, what worked well for Pepsi last time? And let's start to optimize the campaign using what we know about that successful Pepsi campaign. That again wasn't possible. It had taken like hundreds of days to pull out that insight and information. And now it can happen in seconds, and publishers are running this optimization. So I think the fact that optimization is moving supply side and curation now enables publishers to optimize within kind of a larger overall buy means actually kind of optimization, planning, all these things can move supply side and can actually work much more effectively because now we can process huge volumes of data which sit there.
That's incredible. So, you guys have basically taken the red pill and said AI is the future. We have to go all in.
Totally. So, and I mean, everything's transforming. Like, we built a brand safety kind of analysis tool using LLMs about kind of 6 months ago, where basically you can say, hey, here's like all the brands like public guidelines on brand safety. You can upload a keyword block list, everything. And the LLM will then look at a piece of content. It'll say, hey, this is brand safe or it isn't brand safe. And it'll give you an explanation of why. And these things are shockingly accurate. So, for example, like our publishers who have recipe websites, if they have chicken breast, it gets blocked because most brands are blocking breast.
Right.
And like, it's crazy. Now, with LLMs, that's not a problem. But when we trained these models 6 months ago, it was going to cost like $100,000 a month to run this thing. We tried it out on like the latest DeepSeek version and it cost $1,500 a month. So you're just seeing this like massive drop in the cost of running scaled AI models. And that enables us to do things which we never thought possible before. So I think it's a really exciting time and it allows us to reimagine how we do everything within advertising now that you have these kind of LLMs which can do so much of the heavy lifting which previously wasn't possible.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the fact that brand safety is such an obvious place you can apply AI to, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the blunt force objects of like the old way where you just have keywords that you're blocking, right? It's,
Yeah.
it blocked a lot of, there's the Taylor Swift example, right? I mean, like, because she said she wanted to fight for something, right? So like something you couldn't advertise is wild, right? Because it's such an obvious place. That's love that call out and glad to see you're experimenting there. Because I think we, as an industry, we certainly can do better. And I guess turning maybe to types of deals, knowing that direct sold is probably, I mean, most publishers I'm working with, that's definitely an area they're focusing on. They're trying to get better audiences at measurement, at ad sales in order to facilitate that. But knowing that programmatic's still going to be a big part of it. You referenced before how, for many of these publishers, CPMs are really low. And I'm quoting your report here you published last year. Up to 70% of traffic generates CPMs less than $1 right now, which is just wild, right? So why are these yields so low, number one? And then what are you seeing in terms of the mix publishers between direct sold and then PMPs, PGs, et cetera? Like, what are you seeing as the trend in the marketplace?
So honestly, like everything in the market just comes down to the fact that everyone is wedded to IDs and deterministic. Like every issue with the open web can be tracked back to like this addiction to deterministic buying and deterministic measurement. And it's like an open web and open internet like phenomenon and pain and ailment. So like Facebook, if you rewind 5 or 6 years ago, Apple releases ATT. 90% of consumers opt out of being tracked by Facebook with third-party IDs and signals. And I'm not sure if you remember, but like their share price dropped and performance dropped for Apple
Immediately, yeah.
immediately. And then over the last 4 or 5 years, Facebook has rebuilt the entirety of its advertising engine to be probabilistic and to run on top of its own first-party signals. And over that time period, we just seen performance rocket. And now Facebook is just so dominant again in that ecosystem. But the open internet and open web never went probabilistic. It had all these vested interests from the DSPs to remain ID based and to remain deterministic. And that's meant that kind of performance has just been absolutely hammered on the open internet, not because the media is low quality or the audience is low quality. It's high quality media, it's high quality audiences. The loss in performance is because ad tech companies have refused to move from deterministic to probabilistic, and agencies have kind of swallowed this pill that everything they need to do needs to be ID based. As soon as you move to probabilistic buying, all of a sudden you see performance rocket. So like Comcast are called Sky in the UK, and they're the largest programmatic ad spender in the UK. They sell broadband, they sell TV packages, they sell mobile phone packages. They use Permutive to shift all their data buying to probabilistic on top of publisher signals. And in that time period, on their own measurement systems, they were able to grow sales 2.2x and they reduced their CPAs by 55%. But when they went into Google DV360 to like get the reports from it, because everything was deterministic, Google say, "Oh, this is performing terribly." It was only because they were doing match market testing and they were kind of adopting more probabilistic ways of measuring that they were able to see the huge uplifts in performance. So kind of the open internet is wedded to deterministic, and because of that, it doesn't work and it doesn't perform. As soon as we move to probabilistic, there is so much opportunity.
It's a way to save the open internet, right? Looking at deal formats, we went over this a little bit. I mean, knowing that, let's say open exchange, open marketplace has certainly the lowest monetization rates. And I mean, when you cut it down, like how much are publishers actually keeping, right? I mean, I've seen everywhere from 39 to 49%, which is low, meaning they're losing at least half, right? Maybe even close to 2/3, which is a lot. EMPs, I think it's closer to 60% they're keeping. So it varies a lot. And you can see why a lot of publishers are pushing hard for direct sold deals, right? Especially if it's going to be a PMP. Do you see this changing? What can be done about this? And, what is your role in that, in helping publishers, let's say, improve their monetization and help boost the bottom line?
So almost every publisher who's bought Permutive, and actually almost every publisher who's bought Permutive, bought us as what we called a direct sold strategy. So I think kind of the growth of Permutive wasn't really a technology story. What it was we went into publishers and we said, hey, you cannot let your future be determined by the trade desk and other companies because they're wedded to buying on IDs and in a way which is just going to kill your business. So you need to execute a direct sold strategy and build direct relationships with the agencies and advertisers and shift your revenue onto that. And the way in which you can execute that shift is by using your audience data to effectively move people out of open marketplace buying and onto buy it from you. And the reason why buying directly from you is better is you have these audiences which are addressable across 100% of inventory, and you can enable them to reach consumers they couldn't have reached previously. And like the second layer behind this is you have audience data, which is highly valuable, but isn't accessible in market today. So almost all of our publishers have taken this strategy. I think what we've perfected as business is enabling publishers to go on that journey, training their sales teams, helping them build audience taxonomies, helping them with kind of their go-to-market, even like the sales team comp plans, we have benchmarks and data to help publishers do this. And I think kind of that direct sold story is kind of effectively what we've kind of sold into publishers over the last 8 years, not a kind of technology story or technology sale. But I do think kind of a publisher's data, its signals, its audiences, fundamental to kind of their success and their ability to build a long-lasting monetization strategy.
Looking at monetization for publishers, I mean, I think it's obvious that using their own, let's say their own signals, right, in order to inform what's happening with their own inventory makes a lot of sense. But are there other opportunities for maybe data syndication for some of the publishers as well that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think we see two kind of collaboration use cases which have re-emerged across Permutive. The first is there is a tranche of publisher who is 100% sold out almost all the time. Those can be special interest publishers or publishers with very highly valuable audiences. And what they want to be able to do is to match and then kind of probabilistically expand those audiences across other trusted publishers. And what we're starting to see is this collaboration between our publishers where, for example, LGBTQ publisher can say, hey, we're going to model our audiences across folk like BuzzFeed and others who own high quality inventory to actually go and find those audiences and make them available elsewhere. And in that example, you have this win-win situation because you're seeing kind of incremental revenue flow into publishers in exchange for kind of this data sharing and data collaboration model. And then for the publisher who's initiating it, allows them to expand into bigger budgets. So that's been one use case. The other side of this is what you kind of referenced in data syndication, and we see this more with kind of retail customers or customers who have very specific data sets where they'll say, hey, I have a sales team, but that sales team is only 10 people and my data is hyper valuable and I want to grow adoption of that data. But my sales team alone isn't going to maximize my revenue from this data. So instead, I'm going to make it available to other Permutive publishers so those sales teams can use that data and can go to market with that data. And that's been kind of a second area, which has been a like high growth area for us, is actually kind of publishers with very specific and valuable data sets, licensing those data sets to others to go and use in their sales efforts.
It's interesting. So I've been working with CDPs for 10 years. I think we talked about this, Gloria, one of the earlier episodes. And, CDPs are designed for marketers. There's really to give a front end for marketers where they can manage segments, right? Which they could then use for their CRM and marketing across their own channels primarily, right? Email being the heaviest one. And then DMPs were used by the media teams on buy side, right? And I remember a few years ago talking to other people in publishing and think, wow, like there really is a need for something for publishers, kind of like a CDP. Maybe they don't need a CDP because they're not marketers, right? They're working on monetization. There's some need for this, but maybe something kind of like a DMP. And I guess when I became aware of Permutive, I was like, wow, this really does that. This fills that need. Wondering how you react to that statement, and do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, I think it's highly accurate. I think for a long time, like CDPs and Permutive were kind of evaluated alongside each other. I think what's happened over time though is like two things in parallel. The first is like CDPs were born this promise of a single customer view, and that's got swallowed by the data warehouse layer. So like I think CDP, the kind of data storage and organization almost became commoditized into that data warehouse layer. And instead, kind of the category of software like Permutive or a CDP, actually our value moved up into the layer of applications which you build on top of that. So I think where Permutive has had this real strength is on three things. The first is we can manage all these signals for you, ID signals, contextual signals, and cohort signals, and we can manage those into your data warehouse and everything else. Piece number two is we can make those addressable and we can enable them for activation into the ad tech ecosystem. And they're very specific kind of, like we discussed at the start, addressability challenges. So if you do this in the cloud, it's too slow. So you now need to rewrite a lot of these applications to run on device. So we're able to do really well there. And then the third piece is like boring as it sounds, is like the actual insights applications you build on top of that data set are very specific for monetization. So we have planning tools, we have optimization tools, and like increasingly now those are also all powered by AI. And because I think we built these very specific applications for monetization, we were able to move to a level of value which CDPs can never get to.
It's funny. I ran a panel with Steph Laser from AWS and Mike Orensky from Hearst is in New York a few weeks ago on supply side monetization. And it was the consensus of the panel is that this is going to be the year for pub tech. This is going to be the year of the revival of the DMP, but for publishers and for supply side. I mean, what do you agree with that? Is this the year that this really happens?
Yeah, I mean, Steph was bought us when she was at News Corp, so we're big fans of Steph at Permutive. I would maybe reframe it slightly. I think kind of today, Permutive is adopted across like 70% of enterprise media companies. So I think like publishers spent the last 5 years building these data assets, collecting them, kind of establishing them. That has already happened. I think now we're in this phase of how do you drive adoption of those signals at scale? And I think there are two major changes. There's what Steph and Amazon, but also like Snowflake and Google have done, which is they've built kind of collaboration infrastructure into the data warehouse. So you have Perm to come along with a clean room, and rather than having to build all this infrastructure, instead we can run it in Amazon, Snowflake, or Google. And that allows a brand to collaborate directly with a publisher and identify all these really valuable signals. Major innovation and like really exciting because beforehand that wasn't possible. Piece number two is curation then allows us to package up all those valuable signals when a brand identifies what's relevant to them into something which can be bought really easily across multiple publishers in parallel in minutes rather than the months or years it was taking with the previous generation of clean rooms. So I think kind of I believe publishers or publisher tech has already kind of established this huge base of signal. I think really the innovation over the next year is going to be, okay, now we got these signals. What is the new stack of technology required to make those usable and addressable by the buy side?
And so Permutive is very unique in this space, and throughout this podcast, you've really explained why. And I'm curious to know, have other companies seen what Permutive has been doing and tried to emulate it? Or are you guys still like a leader in the space, very unique, and you've created that position over, I think you said 8 years, so it's hard for other companies to really get what you're doing?
In our world, I think now we are the most scaled player, right? We sit across the majority of media companies, and like if you like look at G2, we always kind of lead in like any customer feedback and customer survey type environment. I think we've seen companies emerge who are going after kind of subcategories in the permissive universe, and we're in this strange world now where it's actually like there are companies coming after us versus us just going after other companies. So that's been like a strange change. And I think it's been good. It's like really forced us to like think hard and innovate. And I really love kind of the competitive pressures there. I think what we are in this very fortunate position of, which no other company really other than Google Ad Manager is in, is because we sit across such a scale of publisher and such a scale of signal. I think we can innovate on the adoption and collaboration against those signals in a way in which few other companies can. So now if you're an agency or a brand or a retailer and you come and work with Permutive, you have hundreds of thousands of signals which previously weren't available or usable. And I think for us, kind of a lot of kind of the innovation we've been driving is how do we actually make that collaboration possible at scale so people can start to use these signals?
I mean, I have one last question for you, Joe, and this has been amazing. What are you excited about for Permutive in the next year? Do you have any predictions on AI, curation, or where the industry is headed? I know it's a big question, but would love to hear your answer.
It is. I think this is the year of probabilistic data collaboration and the probabilistic clean room. And that is what I am most like passionate and excited about is AI plus kind of collaboration capabilities in the major clouds, plus curation means that all of a sudden we can build the next generation clean room and the next generation data collaboration in a way which actually scales, where rather than taking months or years to stand up these things, what was taking months or years now takes minutes. And for me, that's enormously exciting and really kind of if Permutive wants to achieve its mission, which is really to kind of rebuild a sustainable open internet, we believe that opportunity will be recognized over the next kind of 2 to 3 years.
Well, this was awesome. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Joe. I know you're really busy, so I really appreciate the hour.